I'd like for you to be turning to three passages. You can get your Bibles out and you can have them marked so you can flip back and forth. And we're going to look at Matthew 25, Luke 12, and Luke 19. So if you want to do that, if you need to sit by somebody and each of you have a different passage, back and forth, that's fine. But get them open and we're going to study what is, I think anyway, an interesting text and a concept that comes up quite often, not proposing to give you all the answers, but certainly to give you a couple. But while you're getting there, and before we start, let me do a few housekeeping things. First of all, with respect to Ron Murray, I didn't do it, but I have wished it to be done. And with respect to the prayer sermon this morning, it is an answer to prayer. So I don't know who did it. I wish I did. Someone said it, and I go, man, I wish I had done that. That would have been like a badge. But so anybody who's brave enough to claim that, I would like to. I won't even tell him. Just tell me you did it, and I will reward you handsomely. Number two, with respect to the Thanksgiving or the holiday baskets for people, I am the chairman of the Resource Center for Daniel Boone Elementary. And we do these baskets through the resource centers in the different schools. So I want to get on board with Chris by letting you know the effect of what we're doing is seen. Every resource center talks about the Richmond Church of Christ. I had a discussion this morning, and it gives me an opportunity to clarify and to make sure we understand something. The question that we were talking about and that we understood well was, is there anybody who's a member here because they got a food basket? Or is there anybody who visited here because they got a food basket? Well, I don't know. But that's not even the point of the food basket. The point is we're doing what God tells us to do, which is to spread the word. And as we're doing that, then that concept is permeating. And so we're in every school, and I know because of the director of the Resource Center where I am, that the directors get together and talk about it. And so by the very fact that the name is out there and people understand what is happening, then there's much good being done. Third housekeeping thing before we get into the text. I don't see Eddie. Is Eddie Lawrence here? No. Well, Eddie's working on something, and we finally got the bug figured out. Here's what's going to happen. My 24-year project has been completed. The writing that I began 24 years ago before I came here. And I have spent all the time here talking with individuals and in groups and in classes, and all of that material about what was the real sacrifice of Jesus. Right now we're working under the title, The Restructuring of Heaven, because that title probably goes, whoops, I better read that one. So here's the deal. It is in a PDF form, and it's going to be made available on our website to all of you. I would love it if you would download it, read it, pick it apart, tell me if it makes sense, if it follows some kind of reason, and that book then is going to be published after the first of the year. So somebody said, why'd you wait so long to write it? Well, because there is potential for controversy, and I wanted to be old enough to handle it. And number two, I wanted to have all of you to read it so I would not be standing alone and you all could also be involved. So I go down, you go down with me kind of thing. But actually, I just would appreciate you checking that out. All right, let's get into this Bible study for just a few minutes. This study is built on the principle of equal but not same. That's a consistent thing in Scripture. Think about God's presentation of the responsibilities of men and women. They are equal in the sight of God, but their responsibilities are different. Think about husband and wife, equal in the sight of God, but their responsibilities are different. Equal, but not same. I want us to think about that with respect to this parable that Jesus told in Luke chapter 19. Now, this equal but not same concept, I'm going to apply to the Luke chapter 19 parable, and I'm also going to use the Matthew 25 parable. And in doing so, we're going eventually to get to a question that I want us to consider because it comes up a number of times. First of all, let's notice, if you're looking at both of those texts back and forth, and I have mine marked like this so you can go back and forth, all right? If you look at them, immediately you think, well, those are the exact same thing, but they're really not. They are equal, but they're not the same. They both teach the same principle, and they seem to do it in the same way, but not really. For instance, the rest of the story in Luke 19, in case you don't know it, since it was not all read, didn't want to take that time, here's what happens. The man went away to receive a kingdom, and while he was gone, he took 10 servants. This is Luke 19. He gave each one of them a mina, and he said, do business until I return. There were some servants who said, we don't want him to reign over us. So they didn't do anything. So the king went away, the man went away, he received his kingdom, he came back to meet those 10 servants, and he called an accounting of them. This is where you begin to see the familiarity with the more popularly understood Matthew 25 parable about the talents. In this case, the king came back, or the man came back, and he said, call in my servants. Now remember, each one of them, 10 servants, had 1 mina apiece. The first guy came to him and said, here is what I've done. I did business with your mina, and now I have 10 more. The second one came in and said, I did business with the mina you gave, and now I have 5. And then the third guy came in and said, here is the mina that you gave me, and I'm giving it back to you. And the master said that he was displeased because he hadn't done anything. Why didn't you at least do something with it? Let it earn interest somewhere. Well, now you recognize, if you know the parable of the talents in Matthew 25, you recognize very quickly some similarities. The similarities in the cities, the 10 and the 5 and the 1. In the parables, there were 3, and these servants received 5, 2, and 1. In the end, they gained 10 and doubled in 4, and then 1 more given back because he hid it in the ground. So you see some things that are somewhat similar. However, they are different. For instance, the time and place is different. In Matthew, he's sitting on the Mount of Olives, talking to his private disciples privately. And in that conversation he's having with them, it's 3 days after he's come to Jerusalem. In Luke 19, that particular parable is while he's coming into Jerusalem, and he's talking to all the people who are walking with him. So you have the time and place different. You have the addressees that are different. You have the details that are different that we've already looked at. But they are similar. And each of them are equal in that they teach the same concept. And here is the concept. Waiting means working. That's the concept. In both of these parables, the servants waited on the master to return. In the Luke 19 parable, in fact, the man goes away and receives his kingdom, and he's come back to his servants, and he said, all right, turn it in. What did you do? And after they gave an accounting, he said, okay, I gave you 1 mina, and you now have 10, or you gained 10 more. Therefore, I am going to put you over 10 cities. So, each one had 1, and each one that reported well increased what he had. So what we have is him telling them, do business until I return. Now apparently, there was a way in which slaves worked back in that time that actually the master would give the slave a job that he paid him to do. And the master's slave would take the money and he would be able to do business with the money, make money for himself, but also for the master. So I would suppose it would make sense to me that the harder he works and the more he makes for himself, the more the master is benefited. So the master would want this servant to work as hard as he can. Do all you can. Get in there and go at it so that you and I both will be benefited. But notice the concept. Do business until I return. In both cases, there was an expectation that while the master was gone, that the servants would be busy. You wait for me to come back. But waiting doesn't mean sit down and do nothing. Waiting means while waiting for his return, while anticipating it, while praying for it, while looking for it, stay busy. Sort of reminds you, doesn't it, of Paul's admonitions to the Thessalonians. Apparently there were some who had quit their jobs because they were under the impression that Jesus was about to return. And so they thought, why work? We'll just quit and sit down and wait till he comes. And it was in that environment in which Paul made that famous statement, he who will not eat or not work, neither shall he eat. So even though they thought the Lord was coming back right then, they still didn't have permission to sit down and do nothing. Stay busy. The principle behind this is waiting means working. Now, equal but not the same. Here's what we're going to take a few minutes in the close to look at. The main point. There are some who have surmised from looking at these two that there is or there are degrees of punishment and reward. Look at Matthew 25. Verse 29. For whoever has more will be given, and he will have abundance. But from him who does not have, even what he has will be taken away. Look back to Luke 19 as he closes this text. Verse 24 particularly, he said to those who stood by, take the mina from him and give it to him who has 10 minas. But they said, Master, he has 10 minas. I say to you, to everyone who has will be given, from him who does not have, even what he has will be taken away from him. There are some who look at these texts and go, see, there is a degree here between reward and punishment. But that's not the main place where this concept occurs. Go back to Luke chapter 12. This is where we find the real difficult passage. Luke 12, starting in verse 47, or verse 48. He who did not know, yet committed things deserving of stripes, shall be beaten with few. For everyone to whom much is given, from him much will be required. And to whom much has been committed, of him they will ask the more. Beaten with few stripes, given more. Degrees of punishment, degrees of reward. That's a question that comes up quite often. And to be honest with you, I don't think it really matters. I don't know that we can get a clearly understood concept because we have to understand Jesus did say what he just said. But what does he mean? Let's think for just a few minutes about those two parables, Matthew 25 and Luke 19. Think about this. First, in Matthew 25, Jesus has, according to chapter 24, he has called together his disciples privately. And the discussion that he is having with them about talents is meant for their ears only. So who are the servants to whom have been given 5 talents, 2 talents, 1 talent? They are his servants, especially his disciples. I think it is intended for us to see that as the faithful of God, Christians. He is talking in Matthew 25 about God's expectations of his people. And amongst his people, what does he say? I've given some 5, and some 2, and some 1 talents. I think we are expected to understand that as being that we are all different and unique, and we have different things that we bring to the table. And God is responsible for saying this person has 5 talents, and this person has 2, and this person has 1. And on the front end, no one is said to be less than the other. They are all equal, but not the same. It sort of reminds you of 1 Corinthians chapter 12, when Paul would address the body. And he would talk about how if the parts of the body argue with each other about who's better, then the eyes want to be a nose, then all of a sudden you can't see. Or the mouth wants to be an ear, and all of a sudden you can't talk. We're all equal, but we're not the same. And in his discussion in Matthew 25 to his disciples, he's telling them that. And he's saying all of us need to keep working and develop the talents that we do have until he returns. It's not good enough to have 1 talent and bury it and do nothing with it. But now Luke 19. This parable is different. This parable is addressed to all of the people who are traveling with him as he's coming into Jerusalem. And in this parable, he is addressing servants. Well, who are the servants? They are everybody. Because whether we like it or not, whether we know it or not, we're all God's children. Maybe not in the special sense of being adopted into the family, having not some been obedient to the Lord. But we're all children of God, every single person in that. God created every single one. And to every single servant, God has given a mina. He's given something to do. He's given them a responsibility. Every single one. It is, therefore, it seems to me, Luke 19, that Jesus addressing the multitudes is talking about the general responsibility that everybody has and is accountable to the Lord. And in Matthew 25, he's talking about the specific responsibility that his people have to him as their Lord and Master. Now, go to Luke 12. Here is where I think we can get a possible answer to this question that arises. Go back to verse 41. Look what Peter said. Lord, do you speak this parable only to us or to all people? Well, based upon what we see happening when you read the verses around it, it seems that Jesus is saying for sure, this is what I'm telling everybody. Everybody needs to know this. And what parable does he tell? Who is a faithful and wise steward, verse 42, whom his master will make ruler of his household to give them their portion of food in due season? Blessed is that servant whom his master will find so doing when he comes. I think this is parallel to what he's going to do in Luke 19. He's talking about all the servants, everybody who wants to be a part, especially of the family of God. Verse 44. Or verse 45, if that servant says in his heart, my master is delaying his coming, and begins to beat the male and female servants, to eat and drink and be drunk, and the master of that servant will come on a day when he is not looking for him, and an hour when he is not aware, and he will cut him in two and appoint him his portion with the unbelievers. And that servant who knew his master's will and did not prepare himself or do accordingly to his will shall be beaten with many stripes. But he who did not know, yet committed things deserving of stripes, shall be beaten with few. Now, here's what I think is the key, the end of verse 48. Notice what happens. To everyone to whom much is given, much, or from him much, will be required. Here's what's interesting. To whom much is given, that word is a general word in Greek, didomi, which means simply to give. To give. It's the same word used of Jesus in John 4 and verse 10, where Jesus, in talking to the Samaritan woman, says to her, if you had known the gift of God, pointing to himself, and who it was that said to you, I'll give you drink so that you will not thirst. Jesus called himself the didomi. Jesus called himself the gift of God. To whom was Jesus given? Everyone. To whom much has been given, much will be required. Jesus was given to everyone. Therefore, everyone has responsibility. And from everyone, God will require responsible living. But look at the end of the verse. To whom much has been committed, of him they will ask the more. This word committed is not didomi. It's not given. Paratheno means to place near to or alongside of. It's the same word used in 2 Timothy chapter 2 and verse 2. Listen to what Paul said to the young man Timothy, starting in verse 1. You therefore, my son, be strong in the grace that is in Christ Jesus. Now notice, and the things that you have heard from me among many witnesses, commit these to faithful men who will be able to teach others also. Not everybody has that commission. Only God's people. Back to Luke 12. Everybody has been given the gift of Jesus. Therefore, everybody stands responsible to him. Especially, his children have been committed or given a commission. Therefore, they are going to be asked to do the more. So the few stripes and the many stripes, the great reward of 10 cities versus the reward of 5. How do we answer that? Let me give you two possibilities. There's a difference in compensation. One person is compensated with money or a check. Another is compensated with a gift or a trip or a vacation. Maybe in those passages that seem to indicate a greater or lesser reward, or at least not the same reward, equal but not the same. Maybe there is a reference to compensation. Maybe with one it will be this, and with another it will be this, but it's still equal, maybe not the same, but equal. Let me give you a second concept that might answer the question, degrees of punishment and reward. And that's centered around the concept of experience. In other words, maybe these passages indicate an experiential difference of punishment and reward this way. Not any of us experience the same event in the same way. We get a different feeling about it. When my wife and I last year went to see Mannheim Steamroller at Christmas, we were at the same thing at the same time, but we experienced it totally differently. You see, I don't like Christmas music. Okay? Different experience. One might say punishment and reward. That was about what it felt like at times. But here's my point. We can be in the same experience and experience it differently. So we're all in heaven. But for me, maybe it feels like a hole in one. For you, maybe it feels like the last basket at a buzzer beater. Maybe for you, it's a blue ribbon from winning a cooking competition. I don't know. Equal, not the same. I don't have an answer for all that. But I have those two thoughts, and then I have this final thought. Tom Holland put this thought in my head as a freshman at Freed-Hardeman. He made this statement. I don't know the answer to the degrees of punishment and reward, but I know this. I would rather have a bedroll on the floor of heaven than a throne room in hell. So I don't know the details, but I know this. I'll take the least of heaven over the best of hell. Wait means working. If you want to go to heaven, if you want to be rewarded, whatever that turns out to be, you can't sit down and do nothing. We have a job. We have responsibilities. And God expects us to work while we wait. Think about those things. Give me some input, and I certainly will stir it into my thought process. Tonight, if you're not a child of God, if you've never obeyed the Lord, completed that obedience in baptism, we're here for you tonight. Or if you need our prayers and our help, we ask you and offer you this opportunity to come while we stand and sing.